Welcome to Nonprofit Stories, inspiring tales from Silicon Valley. We will explore the transformative work of nonprofit organizations and leaders who are changing our community by tackling some of the most pressing issues facing Silicon Valley. So without further ado, let's dive into this exciting conversation. Today, we welcome Rashmi Rustagi, producer of Designed by Preeti. Designed by Preeti depicts a woman's fight against domestic abuse and mental health issues, inspiring change and dialogue on vital social matters through true event-based, authentic storytelling, aiming for empowerment and understanding. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their community commitment and for making this podcast possible. In Silicon Valley, about 45% of the Indian diaspora faces mental health challenges stemming from work-life balance, immigration uncertainties, and cultural isolation. Additionally, 40% struggle with cultural assimilation, impacting their social and psychological well-being. Despite high education levels, Indian families also face a 15% income disparity, highlighting prevalent underemployment and wage gaps. Before we dive into the conversation, let's learn a little about the organization's great work so far.
Every anniversary, she gets something special.
Please, Ajay. You think people are blind? You brought her into our home.
Have you been seeing other men?
No, never.
Then why would Dad lie?
I have feelings that I've never felt before.
You're becoming your own person. You have a degree in design.
From India, and my work experience is housewife.
My friend Erica has a boutique in the city. I'll just connect you with her.
Oh, that would be great.
Preeti's boutique, Preeti's creations, Preeti's designs.
Designed by Preeti. That's it.
Designed by Preeti.
You are in business.
All right.
And now your host of Nonprofit Stories, Dee Kiso.
Welcome to the program today as we welcome Rashmi Rustagi. I want you to really listen carefully because we're going to talk about interpersonal abuse and domestic violence here in Silicon Valley. Rashmi, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. So tell me, what inspired Designed by Preeti and its focus on diaspora and challenges?
So I raised my kids here in the Bay Area and lived here for a long time. And I noticed that three of my friends, my South Asian friends, Indian friends, who were in abusive marriages, abuse from every level, and they put up with it. And they were educated upper middle class women. And I journaled and wrote about them. And then when a close relative, I found out about a close relative, a similar thing, putting up with abuse, it really nagged at me, and I really wanted to tell the story. So after making a successful short film, which is on another topic, during the pandemic, I had the time and the luxury to write the script. So I wrote this feature film based on their lives, and to educate people about, and especially the next generation, about us, women who came from India, first generation. A lot of us had arranged marriages, and the biases and the brainwashing, the cultural stigmas, etc., that we bring with us and live with, and so that's what inspired me to tell this story.
So, can you define domestic violence? It isn't always a slap. Can you tell us what are some of these other innuendos that describe domestic violence?
interpersonal abuse, doesn't have to be between partners. It could be at work. Somebody's, the workplace harassment doesn't have to be physical abuse. It can be abuse, verbal, etc. Domestic abuse is, of course, between married couples and or partners living together. It can, again, be gaslighting, verbal abuse, or, of course, physical abuse. A lot of these women that I talk to, and when people find out that I'm making this film or I made this film, they tell me their personal stories. And a lot of these women have endured horrific violence. This one woman who was 6 months pregnant and was pushed down the staircase by her spouse. That kind of physical abuse. Here in America, in the Bay Area, there are 4 domestic abuse support organizations, primarily for South Asians. So it is really a topic that needs to be talked about, addressed, and the solution, there has to be a solution to this.
So why do women tell better stories about women?
Oh, because women are more empathetic and women understand women better. Right now, Hollywood and Bollywood is primarily men telling all sorts of stories, women's stories, children's stories, men's stories. When women make movies, or when women tell women's stories from a woman's perspective, they're so much better. Look at Greta Gerwig. Look at her work. Look at Mira Nair's work. These are women that tell women's stories about strong women, about powerful women, about sensitive women, about women with passion and empathy. And it's so easy to relate to these stories. It's so easy. It's so beautiful to be able to relate to these stories. So yes, women should be telling women's stories. And I found that in my script as well. I brought in not just the woman's perspective, because this is a woman's story, but also an Indian woman's perspective, cultural perspective, things that we do. We do festivals that are only for celebrating a man's life. Your husband's, you fast for your husband, you fast for your son. There is no festival where you fast for your daughter. So or you fast, or the husband fasts for his wife, God forbid. So those are the stories that women know and women can tell.
Well, I'd love to have you back to learn more.
Thank you.
How does the film address the complexity of the Indian woman's identities?
So as a woman, first-generation immigrant who came to the U.S. after an arranged marriage, I can understand, and I understand how when you're 17, 18, 19 years old, especially in my generation, that's the age that a lot of us got married, 18, 20. You've lived in a household with your parents. You've never gone out of the house. You've never dated. And all of a sudden, you're in a foreign country, married to a strange man. And you're learning the culture, the language, learning how to drive, and discovering your sexuality, your sexual identity. It's a lot. It's a lot. You're basically a child at that point because of lack of experience, if nothing else. And to be thrust into this culture and this identity, you're having to grapple with all of that, and then grapple with, if you have a bad marriage, if you have an abusive partner, you have nobody to fall back on, no family, which is far away. At the time that I came, we didn't even have telephone communication, good telephone communication. Internet was obviously not there. So those are the things that I've addressed in the movie. A lot of the things that are not just of that time, but which continues to afflict women of my generation.
Why focus on domestic violence and interracial relationships in the film?
Because that's a topic that has not been talked about, is not being talked about. And, everything is just peachy and and in films, and especially not being talked about by women, women of color, Indian women, about women. And as I mentioned, it has really become quite a problem, especially after the pandemic. Partner abuse, domestic abuse has become huge, and especially in immigrant women who are still struggling to get their permanent visas or green cards. That's another way of the men controlling these relationships, and during the pandemic that really escalated. I was talking to this organization, Maitri and Narika, two big organizations that support women, and they said that during the pandemic, their phone line, they had to hire like 7-8 more people to just for the hotline, to answer the hotline, because it has escalated so much.
So tell me more then about the interracial relationships.
Yeah, our kids that are growing up here are marrying. They're marrying not just Indians, but finding partners from other races. And as parents, as us, as our people of our generation, we are kind of stuck in that, I want my child to not just marry an Indian. I want them to marry a Brahmin, not just a Brahmin, an Iyengar Brahmin. We cannot live in that mindset, and we cannot put that pressure on our children who are raised here, who are exposed to all kinds of races and all kinds of people of every skin color and every ethnicity. And I continue to preach this to my fellow Indians, that we need to embrace that. In my film, my character falls in love with somebody outside her race, and because the story is based on a true story, I know somebody who was in this situation and got a lot of grief from the community. People stopped inviting her because she was dating a Black man. And there was so much grief that she got from people. So I wanted to break that barrier, and I wanted to bring that message in, that here she has found somebody, a man who loves her, who cares her. That's all that matters at the end of the day.
Right. So what was a turning point that led you from acting to producing?
So I've been an actor for a long time. I was a child actor in my hometown in Lucknow, and did radio plays. And then after getting married and moving to the U.S., there was not much theater in the small towns that we lived. Eventually moved to the Bay Area, and that's where I really found theater. Started doing theater like crazy because it was just so gratifying, and I've found my calling, my passion. And then I slowly started going to LA for auditioning and doing film work. So that was kind of my film journey. And then, but there's not much for us. There's not very many roles for middle-aged Indian women. And especially 10, 15 years ago now, lately, that's changing. It's starting to change a little bit. And so, like they say, if there's not a door, build it. So I started writing and making short films, and made a couple of short films, and successfully. And one of them did very well, award-winning film. And then I thought, okay, this is what we have to do, is to create the door and start writing the roles for us and telling our stories.
So how do your experiences in Silicon Valley influence the stories you tell?
Well, so the first short film that I keep talking about is called Unborn, and it was it was not as much influenced by Silicon Valley, but it was influenced by another town in California. And it's about, that story is about female feticide in the Indian community in America today. And it's on Amazon Prime. And then when I was writing this feature film, this is based in Silicon Valley. Pretty much 3-4 women that I knew here, that I know here, who inspired this, whose life story inspired this film. So that's pretty much, I give credit to the Silicon Valley for that story. Yes.
So why choose Silicon Valley as the cultural backdrop for this film?
Well, my feature film is really based on the lives of three women that live here in Silicon Valley. I live here, and the story is really truly inspired by their lifestyles, by their lives. Silicon Valley has 4 big organizations that support domestic abuse, and there is a huge gathering or a huge number of Indians that live in Silicon Valley. So it really does relate to them.
It does. So tell me more. Do you think this is unique to your culture, or do you think it's more Silicon Valley?
It's not unique to the culture. There are other. I mean, domestic violence is rampant everywhere. So it's not unique to the culture. It's not unique to Silicon Valley. However, it because of the high concentration of Indians here, and especially in the tech world, where their visas depend on their jobs, or jobs depend. You could say vice versa. The story will resonate more with the area.
A typical problem homeowners have when wanting to buy a new home is whether to sell first or buy first. Either way is risky. When ready to look for a new home, TradeMyHome.com, powered by Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, offers an upfront guaranteed cash offer on your current home. Are you moving in the next 3 to 6 months? Text PAIR to 408-740-7400 for a free and no-obligation professional equity appraisal report, exclusively for Nonprofit Stories podcast viewers. For more information, visit TradeMyHome.com or call 408-740-7400. Remember, at TradeMyHome.com, your home is sold guaranteed or we'll buy it.
What challenges did you face blending Indian and American cultures in creating the film?
Actually, that was not very challenging at all, because I've done that for the last 30-some years that I've lived here, arrived here. Fortunately, I knew how to speak English when I first arrived in the United States. But other than that, everything was new. Everything had to be learned. And so all these years I've been juggling the Indian culture, the American culture, adapting both, getting the best of both. So I feel like I have the best of 2 worlds, and the values that I brought with me, and the education that I wanted to give to my children or the next generation. Knowledge is power, and I wanted them to have that knowledge. So I did everything that I could, including writing a food blog, an Indian food blog, as the kids started growing up, to say, hey, these are the shortcuts. You can cook Indian food. You need to learn. You need to keep your identity. So I wanted to make sure that the children knew how to keep their Indian heritage as they grew up here, as they're growing up here, and embracing the Western culture and the Western heritage, so that they can have both, the best of both worlds. And they have used those recipes. They've shared it with their friends, just so that they can keep that identity.
How does the movie portray the generational shifts within Indian families?
So in the story, my character Preeti has to repair her relationship with her daughter, the daughter who is tormented between what her parents are telling her. So there is a generational divide, which my character has to breach and has to cross and bridge, rather. So there is a generational divide that my character has to bridge with her daughter, and that conflict is well portrayed in the story.
What messages do you hope Silicon Valley's community takes from your film?
Oh, I'd love for the people to first of all acknowledge that the problem exists. I talked to so many people, including a close relative I just had a conversation with last week, who said, "Are you kidding? Does this happen in America? To affluent, educated people domestic abuse? No way, not in Indians. And I get that a lot. So first of all, I need to convince these people that how do you solve a problem? First, you have to acknowledge that the problem exists. So I want people to acknowledge that the problem exists, to go to these blogs, to go to these websites that support domestic abuse victims and hear women's stories, real stories, and then figure out or encourage the women or the men to seek help. There are 800 numbers. There are numbers that you can call. There are therapy has so much stigma in our culture. To seek out therapy, to seek out counseling, and to break away, not wait to get a divorce or not wait to walk away from a bad marriage or an abusive relationship because your parents said this, or because the culture says this, or because your friends say that this is bad, that you shouldn't be doing that. It's your health, your body first. You have to take care of yourself. And if it means moving away from an abusive marriage, moving away from an abusive partner, you must take that stand and do it.
So tell me a little bit about your first movie, Unborn. What's that about?
So Unborn is a short film, a 17-minute short film on Amazon Prime. I was, at the time, I was living in Central Valley, and my OBGYN said, I'm so frustrated. If I get an Indian patient who has two daughters, one daughter maybe, but especially if she has two daughters, I do not want to do her ultrasound because if it's a girl, it's gone. And my jaw dropped. It's like, what do you mean it's gone? This is America. This is not some backward village in India. And she said, no, selective abortion for a male child is still a thing, a wanted, a desired thing in some parts of the community. And so she said, oh, you're a storyteller. Why don't you make a documentary? And I tried that at first. I tried to talk, but no female patient wanted to talk to me. I interviewed 5 OBGYNs in Central Valley, and they had the same story. They said, yes, we go through this all the time, and we advise our patients that maybe if they must have a male child, maybe they can go through IVF. And then they said, no, this guy, it was just last week, was sitting there, and he said, oh, she'll just get an abortion. And these women were having 5 abortions, 6 abortions. Which is just horrific at its core. And so I wrote this story, which is a positive story about this woman's finding out that and that she's going to have a third girl child, and the pressure of her in-laws to abort this baby. And I play the good mother-in-law, and at the end, my message to her and to every woman out there is that it is your body and your choice. And if you want to keep this baby, it's your call, and you must keep this baby, not because somebody else doesn't want you to. And so that's the core message there. But with the movie turned out quite well, and the girl who plays the leading lady, she's a powerful actress. And every time I watch that movie, and there's a couple of scenes there where it brings tears to my eyes, even though I wrote it and in the film and I've seen it many times, just because it just is a message that needs to be out there, that needs to be delivered.
How do you balance raising awareness with storytelling with your work?
It's a tightrope, right? You don't want to be preaching, and yet you want the message across. So when I was writing the script, my script went through 70 iterations, and we kept tweaking it to make sure that we are A, showing, not telling, because that's one of the things you must do as a scriptwriter, and B, to not become, to not stand on a soapbox and preach, to have this woman live that experience. And when you see somebody else living something, you resonate better with that. Your emotions resonate better with that. So my character, my spouse's character, my daughter's character are all living through that experience, and so that's where the balance is. Not trying to preach, but just living that experience and letting everybody go on that journey with you.
What has been the Silicon Valley response to your work?
Silicon Valley loves the story. They're looking forward to the movie coming out. They're looking forward to watching this movie when it's ready. But I have had a hard time raising money to make this film. And as is the dilemma of every independent filmmaker, raising funds. I'm in several groups, production group, writers group. That's the main gripe that everyone has. Oh, how do I raise funds? And everybody's struggling to raise funds. And so that's what I am trying to do as well. But other than that, people are ready for this film.
So is the film completed?
The filming is completed. Production, which is called production, is completed just 3 months ago. Now we're in post-production, which takes about 4 to 6 months. So we're in the editing process. We have a rough cut, and then once we lock the cut, then we'll go into music composition, color correcting, sound correcting, VFX, all those things. So it'll take a few months.
So how does your movie influence the conversation on social change?
In my movie, I have dealt with several subjects, not just domestic abuse, but about seeking help from a trained therapist, seeking help from your peers, and about interracial romance, about relationships, how to deal with your children. So there are a bunch of issues that we've tried to tackle in this story, and I hope that will resonate with a lot of people.
Why did you give the voiceless a voice in your film?
Oh, because the voiceless need a voice, and especially topics that are not being talked about. And I felt voiceless as an actor, as a storyteller.
What is next for you in creating stories of societal change?
Actually, I have 2 projects that are already in the pipeline. One is a episodic or a TV series, 8 episodes, about a psychotherapist, and the next one is another feature film. I have shot a proof of concept for that film. It's I think it's a 5 or 6 minute conversation between 2 sisters, and that will and that's out there on YouTube. But that would probably be the starting point of that film. Another topic that we need to address, and I'm not going to give that away right now. But yeah, so I have 2 stories already, and as a Bay Area filmmaker, it's I feel like I'm one of the trailblazers in terms of bringing the community together. There are very few filmmakers in the Bay Area, especially female Indian filmmakers, who are making films here. So I want to continue to make films here and get this vibrant community of actors and producers and writers and crew that's just wanting to do creative work, theatrical work. So I'm super excited to be in the Bay Area making films.
So to summarize, we've talked about domestic violence, interpersonal abuse, the awareness that we need in Silicon Valley, because this is affecting real women in real relationships right now in our own neighborhood. How can this community come together to support you in this film right now so we can help not only the Indian community, but everyone to whom this affects?
Oh, I would love everyone to support by donating. We're actually sponsored by a 501c3, so every donation or contribution is 100% tax deductible. The company that sponsors me only takes on projects that speak to them. It's called From the Heart Production. So So they take a lot of projects that are addressing social issues, and especially women. And so if people want to support me and support post-production of this film, they can find us on designedbypreetimovie.com and contribute or donate. And then, of course, once the movie is out, please come and watch it.
You heard it here first. Designedbypreetimovie.com is where you can support the efforts in post-production for this movie to educate and inspire change inside of relationships and work relationships. Let's put an end to this domestic abuse and educate and elevate people so we can have a new day right here in Silicon Valley. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here's a sneak peek of the next episode of Nonprofit Stories, featuring Amy Everett, president of the Golden State Opportunity.
Sure. So I had spent about 17 years running NARAL Pro-Choice California, now Reproductive Freedom for All. And in all the good work we were doing there, one thing always haunted me.
Their mission is to end poverty by providing all Californians with the tools to build financial well-being and thrive.
Who are trying to get good health care for themselves, for their pregnancy, for their children. And they just kept running into lawmakers and policies that really didn't allow them to have the economic security that they needed.
Check out our next full episode on Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific and 8 o'clock Eastern on YouTube and Apple Podcast. Thank you for listening to the podcast and acknowledging the impactful work of nonprofits in Silicon Valley. Please subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their community commitment and for making this podcast possible. Until next time, remember to support local nonprofits.